Thanks for listening to the Nice Podcast. I am available to deliver keynote presentations and workshops for your company or for your conference. Reach out to me, davedelaney.speaks.com, or email me and we can talk. Now on with the show.
Hey, it's Jason Falls of the Marketing Podcast Network. You know we're trying to bring you the greatest education opportunities out there. We've got another one for you, folks. The Creator Economy Expo, CEX 2023, is for content creators and entrepreneurs interested in building and growing their content-first businesses without relying on social platforms. This year's Creator Economy Expo features 10 amazing keynote speakers and over 30 in-depth breakout sessions. Join 500-plus bloggers, podcasters, authors, newsletter writers, speakers, coaches, and consultants and freelancers at the learning and networking event for content creators. Don't be left out. Plan to attend this year, May 1st through the 3rd, 2023 in Cleveland, Ohio. Register now and get early bird pricing. And the Marketing Podcast Network has a special offer for you. You can get $100 off using the coupon code MPN100. That's MPN100. Head over to CEX.events to register. CEX.events, code MPN100.
So the world has been a little crazy, and I feel that it could be a lot nicer. So I've decided to create this podcast that you're about to hear called The Nice Podcast. Now, The Nice Podcast is not just about warm and fuzzies. It's about being leaders and leadership, both in an organization, but also just at home, with friends, with family. It's all about leading with nice, being nice. And I think you would agree with me that we all could use with a little bit more nice in our lives. So the purpose of this podcast is for you to learn to lead with acceptance, to become better leaders. This podcast is about ways that you can improve your life, make you feel better about yourself, about your team, about your friends, your family, about society as a whole. It's about giving back, and it's about helping others, which is really something that I've been writing about and talking about for many years, about the idea of networking nicely, right? The idea of providing value to people and aiming to help others. And that's really what this podcast is all about, having really great conversations with thought leaders who you can learn from, and then hopefully you'll share what you learn and maybe practice what you learn as well to improve your own lives and to make those nicer as well. So without further ado, you are about to hear a little bit more about the podcast from my dear friend, Erik Fisher. He was kind enough to join me today to do the introduction. This is episode 0 of the Nice Podcast. And so he's going to be interviewing me all about what this podcast is about and what you will get from it. I'd also like to add that a special shout out to Alistair Crystal, alistaircrystal.ca. Alistair was kind enough to let me use his music as the intro music. You also heard a lot of voices there, and those are all folks that are email subscribers of the Nice Maker email newsletter, which you can find at nicemaker.co if you're not already subscribed. Thank you to everybody who helped me by sharing their voices at the beginning of this episode and every episode of the Nice Podcast. And now, let's get started.
Nice.
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 Nice. Nice.
Nice.
Nice.
Nice with Dave Delaney.
Okay, so I invited my buddy Erik Fisher on the first episode of the Nice Podcast. And I invited Erik because A, he's super nice. B, he's like a veteran podcaster. And C, well, those are the two main reasons. Like, you're super nice and you're a veteran podcaster. You've been on my previous shows. I've been on your show, Beyond the To-Do List, which is an amazing podcast that you all should be listening to. But Erik, thank you for joining me to do this weird episode 1 or episode A. I don't know. What do you
0,
think?
something like that. Yeah.
0, episode 0.
I kind of call it 0, but you could name this number 1. It doesn't really matter. There's no tried and true convention of you must do this to start a podcast. There's certain best practices, but even then you can question those. But Dave, it's a privilege to be part of you launching this show. it's really nice of you to ask me to do it. And actually, I think that's a really great place to start, because you use that word nice all the time, but that is an acronym that you use. And I would love to maybe hear you say, what does NICE stand for?
Yeah, it's a great question. So as far as the NICE method goes, so I work with organizations and help with their communications and teach leaders and leadership how to be better communicators and to be nicer communicators. And so the way that NICE usually works is the NICE method. It stands for natural, intentional, cost effective, and effortless. And that gets into the whole NICE methodology. And when I work with organizations and teach them how to do this and how to use these steps, it also stands for, initially it stands for needs assessment. So it's me talking to folks and finding out, what they need. It's about increasing social and emotional intelligence. It's about communication mastery, and it's about empowering employees as well. So it's a weird one because I use it in different ways.
Mm-hmm.
I even have my own sort of acronym in my head for different things as well that all work in the word nice. But really, it's all about helping leaders really become better communicators and being nicer to themselves, to their stakeholders, and to society as a whole.
Yeah. Well, and that honestly epitomizes you in my mind, in terms of not just you're the nicest guy I know in many senses, but also everything you were just talking about in terms of communication and integration and collaboration and all the other Asians that you can use. That is who you are. That's who I've known you to be ever since I've known you for, it's been almost 10 years, something around there. I don't know. It's kind of, it's amalgamous in my mind, or whatever. It's an amoeba, but we've known each other for a long time. We've met up in person multiple times.
Mm-hmm.
And so this seems like a perfect fit for you. I wonder though, you've had other past podcasts, so why this one and why now?
Yeah, that's a great question. And thank you. The purpose of this podcast. So yeah, I'll share my crazy background with podcasting. So before studying business and marketing, I actually studied radio broadcasting back in the day, back in like the early 90s, and studied radio and television broadcasting, but I majored in radio. So I've always been an audio nerd. I've always loved radio. And when podcasting came to be back in around 2004, I jumped at it. I loved the idea. And, radio was really difficult to get into as an industry, especially because I'm from Toronto. And Toronto, as far as Canada goes, is like the biggest market for radio. So it would be like living in New York and trying to get get a radio job in New York. You have to usually move to like Tuktoyaktuk or like the middle of nowhere, with all due respect to folks in Tuktoyaktuk. So I decided, okay, well, I'm gonna start a podcast. And so I started a podcast in 2005, and my wife and I had the second parenting podcast, Two Boobs and a Baby. And we ran that podcast for 3 years and got a lot of great feedback and great listenership. And it was a lot of fun. And then over the years, I started other podcasts. One was sort of an improvised Twitter experimental show. Another one was me kind of reading old journal entries. Another one was me sort of pontificating as I walked my dog. And then I did an interview, like a short form interview show for a business accelerator. And then the last show was New Business Networking Radio, named after my book, New Business Networking. And that one was episodes of interviews with thought leaders like yourself, authors, anyone who has been successful in networking the nice way. And that led to me launching Networking for Nice People, and really hunkering down on the word nice, because I feel like the world could be a nicer place these days. So the podcast itself is me speaking to nice guests like yourself to inspire listeners and leaders to become better at what they do. And not just better at what they do, but being kinder, being nicer to themselves. And as I mentioned, stakeholders like the people in their lives, meaning it could be, at work, of course, it could be, your team members, your colleagues, your management, your investors, whomever. but also your friends and family and the people that you meet in the day to day. And finally, society sort of giving back in some altruistic kind of ways. And so I've been dying to start a new podcast. I keep talking about it. And I finally just decided, all right, you know what? Enough's enough. Like, rather than listening to a million different podcasts, which I do, it was time to hit record again. And here we are.
Yeah, well, I am psyched that you're doing that. I know that you've already got some episodes recorded, and so I'm curious though, as an average podcast listener who listens to a lot of podcasts, who is your ideal audience for this? Who is it for? Who should be listening to this? And what will they? Can you tell me, like, what are they going to get out of it?
The podcast itself is for leaders in organizations to learn how to become more effective and better at what they do. But beyond that, it's actually about anyone becoming better leaders. And what I mean by that is, and I like to share this story where many years ago, when I was a kid in Toronto, I ran with a crew of friends, a small group of friends, and we were sort of inseparable. We were all like skateboarders and into punk rock and stuff like that. And I'm very close to those guys still to this day. We've been friends for, about 30 years now. And I got together with one of them a couple of years ago. Now, I should say one of the guys we all kind of considered our leader, even though we never called him that, and we never would never have said it to him. But we all kind of in the back of our minds thought of this one guy as our leader. And he was the one who was always trying to get us to do stuff, get us to go out, get us to come together, and, that kind of thing. He was kind of an instigator in the best and worst possible ways. And a couple of years ago, I was having a beer. It was a while back, because I am now haven't had a beer in about a year or 8 months now. And I was having a beer with one of the guys from that group of friends. And we were just catching up and reflecting on, childhood and all these things. And we started talking about sort of the leader of the pack kind of thing. And of course I mentioned the leader's name, and he looked at me shocked, and he was like, "What?" And I'm like, "Well, this guy was, the kind of leader of the group kind of thing." And he's like, No, you were." And I was like, "Wait, what?" I was totally thrown back. I was just like, "What?" He's like, "No, you were always the leader of the pack. You were always the guy trying to, keep us together and getting us, all together and that kind of thing." And I was really flabbergasted. I started reflecting on this after talking to him, and I realized that we're all leaders in one way or another. We lead our families, we lead our friends, we lead our departments, our organizations, but we're all leaders in one way or another. And even if we're not in a professional leadership role right now, we could still learn to become better leaders, so that as we move on through our careers, and hopefully we do move up and eventually lead some people, professionally speaking, we can use what we will learn from the discussions on this podcast, from my presentations and trainings and writings about this, and apply them to becoming better leaders.
Yeah, I think if I hear you right, when you're talking about leadership and us all being leaders, I feel like, to me, that means we all have influence on other people for better or for ill, regardless of how aware of it we are. And what you're doing is you're walking us through that awareness, one, for acknowledgement that you do have that influence, but then two, hey, do it better, or do it for the positive and eliminate that negative.
Absolutely, yes.
So I really like that. That is something that I can get on board with. So I'll be listening. But I'm curious, can you name drop anybody that you've, already recorded with to kind of queue up maybe, hey, I talked to this person, and this is kind of the path and the conversational trail we went down with that person, just to kind of tease people as to, what they can expect coming soon?
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. I'll share like who my first guest is. My first guest is the one and only Chris Brogan.
Oh wow.
And we
Okay,
had,
I'm in.
yeah. And the episodes are, the episodes are going to range to be as long as they need to be. Chris and I riff for about an hour and a half, I think, maybe a little less than that. And for those of you who don't know who Chris is I think he's written now I believe it's 9 books. He's a New York Times bestselling author. He's a keynote speaker, corporate trainer as well, and a very early adopter in social media. He's co-founder of PodCamp, the podcasting unconference that kind of brought a lot of us together in the first place. And he's just a wonderful guy. Who's deep and honest and transparent in the best possible way, not the cliche sort of transparent way. And he and I spoke at length about a lot of topics relating to leadership and to communicating more effectively and how to do that. But we talk about the state of social media. We spoke about depression and self-doubt and how to deal with that. We spoke a lot about friendship and what that means. And we got really deep, and it was a fun, really eye-opening conversation. So I'm excited to share that as the first episode, which will be in about a week.
Wow. I'm really looking forward to that one. I love Chris. He like you has been on my show a number of times.
Mm-hmm.
Whenever we're able to hang out in person, it's always a blast and it's always fun. And he's a big cuddly bear.
He is, and
a brain behind him, you know.
It's funny actually. We were both speaking at a conference a few years ago, and I had this new suit jacket or like kind of blazer jacket on. And he just pulled me aside. He's like, "Come here, Dave." And he got some scissors, and he had noted, like, when you get a brand new blazer, that there's some stitching in the back of the blazer. And he actually, I didn't realize it was still stitched.
Yes.
And he's like, "Come here." And he pulled me aside and he's grabbed some scissors and he like fixed it for me. And he's like, "I didn't know either, but I found out." And now I'm always on the lookout to help people with that. So that really sums up Chris right there. I actually have a great photo of the moment that he was cutting it for me. And I'll be sure to share that too.
Oh, that'll be perfect. Yeah. To add those personalized moments in there. We'll have to share, maybe the one where you and I and John Michael Morgan
Mm-hmm.
are in the balcony at I forget what it's called. Is it Nasi?
Yeah.
And it's craft content, and I think it may have been the first year of that. And I don't know who exactly started it, but it's defunct now. But the hashtag, bring me beer or something, where we would hashtag it onto the conference hashtag, and then they would bring us beer in sessions, and we're like, "Here you go." And it's like, that's still one of my favorite moments. It
was kind of like a dream come true in a way. Like,
yeah,
where you could just like use a hashtag on Twitter and suddenly that thing would appear. It was amazing. And we have Carla Swank, who is one of the co-founders of Craft Content and definitely a big role in community in Nashville in the technology space. I think between her and Chuck Bryant, the two of them, I can't remember exactly how it came up that way. Strangely, actually, now that I think of it, I was on a panel with Chris Brogan, Saul Colt, Loic Lemur, and who else was it? Oh, CC Chapman. And we were on a panel together at South by Southwest many years ago. And Chris had tweeted something about cake, like, "I love cake," or something like that. I can't remember specifically. I don't think it was as bold as like, "Somebody bring me cake." But it was something like, "I love cake," or whatever. And sure enough, somebody delivered a cake to our panel. So maybe there's something to that. Maybe we should all be using Twitter to ask for things.
Yeah. Well, and if I remember correctly, in our situation, it wasn't that we were aiming to get it. We were joking.
Yes.
But somebody came and brought it, and it just snowballed into other people using it the rest of the day. And if I do remember correctly, it was probably the first or second session of the day past the keynote. So it was pretty early. It was, pre 10 a.m., around 9, 10 a.m. But, breakfast of champions.
There you go.
I can't wait to dive into the rest of the episodes when they come out. And I'm trying to think of what else do we need to cover here other than to just say this is going to be awesome. I'm really looking forward to listening myself personally, and because you're a great podcaster, because you get to the heart of people and then just jump into these conversations like we've kind of strayed off here ourselves. So
Right.
man, what else do we need to know? Is it weekly, and where can we find it and all that great stuff?
Yeah, that's a great question. You can find it at davedelaney.me, but you'll be able to subscribe in all the regular places. I plan to do the show around 30 minutes to an hour per episode, give or take. Again, it'll just be as long as it needs to be. I plan for the show to be weekly, so I'm going to do my best to get one out every week, and we'll see how that goes as well. So the podcast will launch. I mean, it already has, because you're the first for episode 0. So thank you, Erik. But I do encourage folks to subscribe, and you will get new episodes on the feed. And of course, I will always be promoting the new episodes in the Nice Maker newsletter, which I drop every Friday morning.
Perfect. Yeah, great newsletter. Ideally, you've already found this through that, but if you haven't signed up for that, make sure to do that. And Dave, thank you for the honor. It was really nice of you.
Erik Fisher, you are super nice too. So thank you for joining me and for this little pre-podcast interview. I do appreciate it. And where can folks find out more about Erik Fisher?
Oh, yeah, sure. Well, you can find out more about me and the show that I do. My preferred social network is Twitter. You can find me there at twitter.com/Erik with a K, the letter J, FISHER. And you can find my productivity podcast at beyondthetodolist.com.
Excellent. Erik, thank you so much for being a part of this. And it was fun.
My pleasure.
Okay, so that was episode 0 of the podcast. And thank you for being here. The intro music, again, is by Alistair Crystal, and the song is called Little Jane May. And the outro music at the end here is Funny Feeling, also by Alistair Crystal. Thank you again for letting us use your music. If you'd like to learn more about the podcast, subscribe, and all that good stuff, you can find us at nicepodcast.co. That's nicepodcast.co. I'm Dave Delaney. Be nice.
You may know you're listening to this show along the Marketing Podcast Network, but did you know there are other great shows on MPN to help your business? Ian Truscott hosts a great podcast called Rockstar CMO. Ian, tell us what these fine folks will get when they listen.
Well, Jason, I'm no rock star, but I've picked up a thing or two over the last 20 years on my tour from sysadmin to CMO, and each week I chat with the true rock stars, my fabulous guests and chums, and share what we call marketing street knowledge to inspire our listeners in a rock star.
Amazing. Where can people subscribe?
Go to rockstarcmo.com, find the show at marketingpodcast.net, or search for Rockstar CMO FM wherever you get your podcasts.
You heard him. Go subscribe.